And I would just think, like, how cool it would have been. Like, just today, like, it's on my phone still. For some reason, I went down the Elvis Presley rabbit hole. I'm not even an Elvis guy. But for some reason, I started, and it was like, you watch back when they would do these records, and it was like everybody show up in a three-piece suit with a cigarette and it was beautiful. Like, going to the studio was like this romantic, religious experience for people, right? To put on a suit to record. Beautiful.
Well, this is fun with the Raven in the background talking away. Neil Spears, Hardwire Spears, how are you doing today? So I just had a great conversation with a new friend, Steve Dierkin of Studio D here in Calgary. He has got an amazing underground studio. It's hilarious. It is. He's got some toys in there. Very tasty. Let's go take a look at his studio and talk to him about music.
My name is Steve Dierkin, and this is Studio D. Welcome to the basement of musical delight. Drum room.
So what kind of drums are these?
These belong to my friend, Mr. Kent McCrae. And this is a Yamaha custom kit that he has assembled over the years. It is a bit of a Frankenstein kit that just has made a gazillion records and sounds fantastic. So it has just been camped here because he's here often enough that we just leave it here.
Nice.
And then up there is kind of storage, and guitar amps get thrown up there if there's a whole bunch of us making noise. And, extra space is good. Always need more space. In the corner, left, swing right is the vocal penthouse. Everybody loves singing on their records, and I always say I make records just so we can do vocals because they're really fun. Mm-hmm. Kind of a fun room. We did real brick in the back for guitar cabinets and stuff, and I'm a big drape guy. Early on, in the 90s when I had my studio in Orange County, I had a guy come in that insisted on taking his kilt off to sing, and had his little tighties on. And so from then on, I've been about the drapes. So there's drapes on the inside if you want to, and then I put some on the outside if I don't want to see you. So
tell me about this mic.
This particular SM7 is one of the oldies. So it is the non-B version. I found it at an estate sale, sitting in a cardboard box under a pile of vinyl records. And I asked the gentleman if I could purchase it, and he told me, yeah, give me a couple $100 and you can have it. And so I ended up with an original Michael Jackson SM7. And then behind that, just currently up right down there, is a U87, I think it's around early 70s is what most people theorize on that particular mic.
Okay.
So yeah, there's something to be said for the neat old stuff.
Yeah. You use the power play for personal monitoring?
Yeah, I've been through several iterations, and those little power plays just sound embarrassingly good, and they're really easy to use. Even bass players can figure them out. We love the power plays. Said bass player hangs out in here most of the time.
And the vinyl collection.
And some of the vinyl. And it's funny. Bass players come out of sessions and they're usually carrying something they want to listen to. It's kind of fun between takes. They're fishing through the bins. And then the etc. room, it's a bit cluttered. I've got a hard drive cleaning operation going on. That was part of my pandemic. One of my pandemic projects is I set up a laptop and a thing, and I was just moving stuff on old hard drives and then drilling them and recycling them. So clearing out boxes to keep me from staying out of complete debauchery and trouble during the pandemic. Old B3. This particular guy belonged to Ron Cassat, who many people in town know. Absolute legend. And it has had a long and glorious life of travel and beautiful locations in town. And when he passed away a few years ago, he left it to Mike Little in his will. And it was sitting in his living room with his TV on it. And so Mike brought it down here and parked it. And it's been living we did a bunch of restoration on it. It's living a good life down here.
Excellent. And what mic is this one?
This is a big Neumann, big 149. I was using it on a violin the other day. Yeah.
Nice. And I see an old MBS in the corner there.
Yeah, that old ribbon still works. My grandfather worked for Columbia Pictures back in the 30s, 40s, and he was a driver, and he drove celebrities around the lot. That was his entire career, was driving the golf cart. And so he said one day he was going through the lot, and they were just throwing these things in a dumpster in the back. And there was a bunch of them in a dumpster, and he said he just reached in and fished one out. And when he died, it ended up with my dad, and then my dad's still alive, but every time I would go visit them there in California, I would, this thing was sitting in his office, and I'd kind of glance at it. It was a running joke. How's your health? How you feeling, Pops? And so about 2 years ago, he came to visit, and it was in the suitcase, and he just goes, I don't want you to want me to die anymore, so take the stupid thing. So we've actually used it on a few jazz records, and it's the original ribbon. It still sounds
nice.
Fantastic. So, yeah, there's drawers and drawers of mics up in that upper room up there.
Sure there is.
I guess at the end of the day, if you start in a bad spot there, you're kind of fighting uphill. Yeah, and then down the hall behind you is the bathroom, and then, that tunnels into the house there.
Nice. The escape route.
Because it's cold in Calgary. That's what I've learned. And then through this door is up the stairs, up to the entrance, and the kitchen's up there.
Yeah.
That's where the wine and scotch and coffee lives.
Okay.
And then in here, just lots and lots of... My accountant believes they're tools.
Mm-hmm.
To us, they're toys. Everything in here is... I must have everything here to do what I do. So, a bunch of this came up from L.A. The console's newer edition. I decided I needed more analog noise in my signal chain, so got the big analog console. It came up from England, and so I love the hybrid of having the thing and then the plug-in of the thing, and I use both or either depending on what we're hacking away at.
Nice.
So there you go.
So let's talk about maybe some of these wonderful looking analog pieces.
Wonderful sounding when they work.
Yeah, that is one thing about analog.
Yeah, you just got to know where to kick it. Just blow cold air in it.
Percussive maintenance.
Yeah, it usually works. I started at this fairly young, at a high level, fortunately, and got to play with a lot of really, really neat toys as a young lad, and just kept a running list in my head of the one day I'm going to have one or two of these things, and then just started slowly accumulating them. And so there's stuff in there they haven't made in years, and there's stuff in there they just started making, and so it's all like everything's analog except for kind of this corner down here. It's converters in the bottom right, but everything else is pretty classic stuff. Like that was the intention, right? It's just.
So what are your converters?
The converters down the bottom right of the Lynx Aurora. There's always conversation of upgrading them, and then I just don't, because it works. It just works. Even when the power goes out and comes back on, everything just works. And it's finally... I put the new Mac Pro in. That was one of my pandemic projects. And it just took weeks, to, reinstall every little thing and make everything talk. So, there's some really neat stuff all around in here.
You've got several tube decks.
That CL1B is my Desert Island compressor for sure.
Nice.
That CL1. Love that thing. The manly stuff is, everything. You just gotta go through the whole.
Yeah.
Just go down the row, right? I'm a huge Rupert Neve Designs fan. I can't say enough about.
Those are the
what he was doing. There's
33s
here. There's these tape emulators. These 542 things. Just I know them fairly well, and I've sat with them. Dennis is their main kind of builder guy. He was. I guess Rupert's passed now. He's the right hand to Rupert on this stuff, and I've had him try to explain how this stuff does what it does, and even sitting with him, looking at his face while he tries. I don't. It's all just voodoo of copper and lots of, at the end of the day, Rupert's thing is just lots and lots of power. Just takes a lot of juice. These things, great. Master bus boxes, and toys.
Excellent.
One bright screen.
The security system.
That's right. Which it started off as, and now it's just the like, oh, Neil's here system, right? Like I realized a day and I have no way to know what's going on. Like the world could be burning out there.
That's what I've often thought, was throwing up cameras just to display outside.
Sure.
Know what time of day it is.
That's it. Half the time it's my window on the world. So the origin story, I guess. Yeah. Born raised California, adopted by wonderful people at birth, and had a fairly charmed young life. I grew up in a suburb kind of out east of Pasadena, and started late junior high, early high school. It was when I finished junior high. I got from Costco, at that time it was called Price Club. I got a Casio little key, one of those little ding, 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 the one that plays a little left hand, does all the little. Yeah. We all know it. All of us that are of a certain vintage, and so I got that thing and just pounded it to death. And that was my first experience with music ever, touching music making. Upgraded that to a bigger Casio, had built-in speakers and a MIDI port. So then I was what's this MIDI? So then I got my little like DOS green screen cakewalk setup going on MIDI and started kind of writing songs-ish. And then I realized if I got a 4-track Fostex thing, I could record my songs. And then if I got an 8-track, I could record them better. And if I got a 16-track. So then I started just taking over the guest bedroom of my parents' house, to the point where my buddy started going, well, can you record my songs, right? So I'm like, freshman, 14, 15 years old, and I'm recording. I don't know how to do it. I'm just figuring out which way to point the mic and let it rip. And so that turned into eventually I was playing keyboard-ish well enough that I got sent to a big studio by a buddy of ours, and he funded a one-day recording demo session in Hollywood for me and my buddies to record. Anyways, fell in love with the studio. My first time in a big studio, met an engineer, solid big console, parlayed that long, humorous, engaging story that doesn't need to be told now, led to me working at that studio eventually while going to university. So I do nights there all night, do days all day in university. And then more layers of funky story. I ended up working for a big Disney composer. And so then I did that for a few years. That turned into a job at Disney and Warner Brothers and Fox and DreamWorks. And I worked for all those guys kind of through my 20s. And then I always just knew, like, by the time I was 30-ish, I just wanted to kind of be out of that world. Early going into it, I realized, it's just personality-wise, I wasn't made to run at that competitive pace. Yeah, my last big gig at 30 I was working on the Family Guy show, recording dialogue for that. I was the dialogue guy for that for a couple seasons. Met my wife, who's from Toronto. That was an excuse to escape the rat race madness. And so we got married and moved to Toronto, and then the financial 08 thing started kind of shaking around Toronto a bit. And I thought, it's just... So we had been visiting Calgary. We knew some people out west. And I thought, let's just go out west. Like, I love the mountains and the thing and the vibe. And financially, it's got a few more years before it gets kicked in the shins. And so we just came out, rented a house, fell in love with the place, bought a house, adopted a kid, dug out the backyard, birthed a kid. And here I am, having coffee with you.
Yeah, there you go.
There it is. There's the origin story in a nutshell.
So how much of this gear did you have bringing here, or did you buy it all once you
started? Fair bit of it was here for this. Came in boxes to Calgary. The FedEx guy was fascinated by whatever was going on in this house. A few of the pieces came from LA, but the California studio, I did the day job, which was all the film and TV stuff, and then the night job I had 3,000 square feet for about 9 years I had there, and we had a studio in there, but it was way more just, Orange County in the 90s punk record, just debauchery and, using the vocal booths as a smoking lounge, and just 90s fun. So, yeah, there was definitely a lot of, like, one day, when I grow up, I'm going to do this for real kind of thing. And so this was the excuse. We just kind of started down this road.
So you do mixing, mastering? Do you do mastering?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, a lot of recording. For me, it's a lot of like somebody with a guitar and some songs sitting on the couch where you are, just kind of meowing. We call it. Me main cat called the meow meow portion of the process. And then, and then from there, we take it all the way to finished. I usually take it through the mix and then send it to master. Or people will send me mixes to master. But I really enjoy that journey, the beginning to end kind of process of bringing people together to do a thing.
So you do a lot of the producing part as well.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this is the toolbox for me to produce with, right? Like, so there's a couple other people that work out of here, but not, nowhere near what I'm. At the end of the day, it's just me producing things that interest me. Most of it non-commercial. I love interesting stuff. I did lots and lots of commercial stuff, and when somebody cool or interesting or with a good story or whatever shows up, to me those are the most fun to work with.
I know a lot of people, when they're thinking about studios, they're not really sure what's the difference between mixing and mastering. How do you see mastering as opposed to mixing?
Yeah, I mean the stages, I guess, are pre-production. Vet your song, take it apart, make sure all the pieces work. The production is putting all the people on it, recording all the bits. The analogous bit is shooting the movie. And then there's the post-production, which is usually me sitting here alone in the middle of the night, candles and wine and tuning vocals and editing drums and stacking guitars and copying and pasting things, and that's editing the film, right? So that's and then mixing is just assembling all that. So it's as we record, it's every single element. The drum kit is 16 or 17 pieces on the mixer here lined up, and it's just mixing those all together, right? So and my analogy for that is taking all the ingredients and putting it in the oven, right? And just you cook it until it tastes right. Stir in the soup, right? Adding things and taking things out and balancing, whatever. So that piece. And then once it's done, so it's done. So a mix is a finished song. People would listen to it and say, that sounds like a song. Mastering it's a dark art. It's this weird voodoo by which, I'm an analogy guy, that's taking a fairly clean car and waxing it. People look at it, go, it's a clean car. Once you wax it, you go, oh yeah, now it looks waxed, right? So mastering is one of those things where you don't miss it until done it and take it away and you go, I don't know what happened. Commercially, mastering, it's one of its primary functions is just making stuff louder these days. We're in the midst of, if it ain't loud, it ain't good, especially with pop and EDM and stuff. It's just so bleeding loud. So mastering guys have gotten really good at it. I mean, its original function was to just make master vinyl, make a master lacquer, right? Like you balance it so the needle doesn't jump out of the thing with a big kick drum or whatever. So it was making the master, and now it's just kind of evolved into this kind of making it sound slick or whatever.
So when you're producing, what's your personal touch on that? How do you see your role in producing?
One of the things I notice a lot of producers do, rightly or wrongly, is you'll have a producer that has a sound. That guy has a sound or whatever.
Daniel and
yeah, they have a sound. These days, it's way harder to do that. In modern, the next generation, those guys, you go to them for their sound, their wall of sound, or their whatever. They did Motown, or whatever they did. And now all of, the me's, we're way more chameleon-ish, if that makes sense. Just because there's so daggone many of us. So there's a huge part of, for me, is not imparting the sound on it. If that makes sense. It's what do you, the amount of conversations of what are you trying to make? What do you want to sound like? Who inspires you? What do you hear yourself sounding like? Those kind of conversations then, run through a matrix and a lot of knobs and buttons and stuff, and hopefully come out the other end, reflecting that original answer. And not having me imparting my thoughts, and so, and I think that's, for me, that's a big part of it. Is what are you trying to make, and then how do we get there? And so that's for me, that's where a lot of the analog love comes from. Is that to me, it's just there. It's just another option, because there's a lot of people that say I want it to sound like this, and there's a certain amount of noise and heat and busted knobs and whatever that you need to create that sound. And so even in plugin, I'm a huge plugin guy. I'm a plugin fanatic. But even then, all the plugins are emulating the analog, right? It's like all the DSLRs are emulating film. Like, it's this weird, we're spending all this modern money to look like something that's 40 years old or sound like something that's 40 years old. So it is a strange, irony in all of this analog digital hybrid stuff. So all that to say, I think as a producer, it's just utilizing the tools and the thoughts and the conversation and the decision making to get it to the beginning.
I recorded in another studio, which is about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Before we even sat down and went over my songs, I took in a Spotify playlist and said, this is what I like, this is what I like, this is what I like about this, can we do something like this? And then we went through the songs.
Yeah, and anybody that's done stuff with me will attest to the fact that I am a fanatic about comparables. Like, we're not inventing anything. I have people like, nobody's ever made music like us. I'm like, yes, they have. Like, no, we're original. I'm like, well, what does everybody say you sound like? Well, you too. That's what you sound. If everybody says you sound like you too, then you're not inventing anything, right? So at the end of the day, there's always comparables. And for me, there's a lot of like, if this person and that person and that person all had a baby, there you go, that's you, right? So then we take it apart, right? Figure out why this chicken dish tastes better than this chicken dish, right?
Yeah.
Figure out what the ingredient is. So there's something to that for sure. Playlist.
When you're mixing, is there a particular process that you do, or does it kind of reinvent itself every time?
It reinvents itself. It really does. And for me, there's usually a something. Like there's a chap. I've been doing remote mixes for the last 8 nights. For 4 or 5 hours a night, and there's a high fidelity streaming scenario coming out of here, so he's listening at 192, like he's listening to, like he's in the room, and then we're running Zoom alongside of it so he can see, and he's screen sharing my screen, and that's a whole thing that I've been, pandemic discoveries. But he's in Australia, and he's an Irish artist, brilliant artist, guy named Andy White. He had a band, they've come through Calgary quite a few times, Fearing in White. So Andy working on his new project, and for whatever reason, all of his mixes to me start with the bass, and that's usually not the case. It's usually the opposite of the case, right? The bass is usually the obvious, like, it needs salt or whatever. But for me, like, and that's because it's him, like that's his, and he has a certain sound and a certain thing, and he mics amps, and he does all the things that we don't always do. And so it's just, you can tell that's where everything was built from, right? He's doing these weird fills that the whole band is chasing. And anyway, so all of his mixes have been chasing the bass, right? And sometimes it's a unique vocal or the guitar lick or whatever, right? It's usually who the whole mix is chasing something for me.
Yeah.
And so,
So when you're mixing, outside of cases like that, do you prefer to start with the drums or the vocals?
I usually build from the drums. I usually build from the band. And I know some people say it's a no-no, but for whatever reason, I to my mind, like I just make a really, really good instrumental track. Like, I'll get a reference to what the vocal's doing. I'll put it in. I'll get a feel. Okay, there's 17 vocals, or there's one little meow meow chick, or whatever, right? Like, or it's a big boomy whatever. So I get that reference, kind of that lighthouse, and then I just red button that, and then build a great instrumental that can stand on its own, and then bring the vocal, and then once the vocal's in, then you go back and chase your tail a bit. Like, that lead guitar now is fighting or whatever. But to me, a lot of energy in music comes from, and partly, mainly, dare I say, because singers just aren't as good anymore, right? Like, a lot of the product in modern music is the music, right? It's usually oftentimes written by somebody else, performed by somebody else, and the singer shows up and they throw them on the track or whatever. So, the music is oftentimes much better than the singer. And so, I need to build that life raft and then plop the singer in it, right?
So you spend a lot of time in Melodyne or something like that?
Oh, yeah. All of them. Yeah, these days. Melodyne and Auto-Tune, sometimes more than once, sometimes in a circle. And not even always because the singer's bad. Sometimes just because the bar is raised so high. Yeah. Right? Like, I'm listening to Adele's last record from a few years ago. You can hear the Melodyne on Adele, for crying out loud. Like, you can hear Auto-Tune on Adele, right? Yeah. Like how perfect does everything need, like, you see the big wall of vinyl. like I put that stuff on just to hear flaws, right? Like it's fantastic. I love to hear when the singer got excited and overshot a note by a little bit, or the band got excited and sped up during the fill into the third chorus. Like that's beautiful to me. They didn't quantize it. I mean, modern music, edit every breath out, right? Like cutting between syllables. Like it's just, you know, my analogy for that is we've just boiled all the nutrition out of the music, right? So that's where all this vinyl, like literally just come back at night and just recalibrate, right? Back to why do we care? So
I assume you're Pro Tools mainly?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Pro Tools, and then I do a fair bit in Logic. I do a lot of. I'm not a great player. Like early on, I realized I would never be a great player. Like I was headed that way, and then one of the guys I was working with at some point said, "You got to figure out which side of the glass you want to be on. Like, you know, do you want to know what all this does, or do you want to know what all that does, right?" So I was always way more into literally just being underground, being the support guy. Like that's way more my personality. And so, but I hack away enough at MIDI or whatever that I build a lot of tracks, you know, scored a fair bit of stuff, just hacking away at it. And so, so if I'm writing or composing a MIDI or overdubbing synths or whatever that ends up being in Logic, then I just bounce it out, drag it into Pro Tools, and then, Logic seems way better at MIDI. Pro Tools is fairly missing limbs when it comes to MIDI, and then vice versa. Logic struggles with audio to me, and so Pro Tools is just big blocks of audio. And
anything else about this space that you particularly want to talk about or that you love?
Like it's the house. We fell in love with the house. The house is 1912 or something. Whenever they started keeping records, this house was like well done and sitting there at that point. So it is the OG house. The big green space was a lake until I think like the 70s or 80s or something, and like this guy parceled off the land of this whole strip. The house is facing sideways. The front door actually faces the neighbor's house because the driveway went down over the river, and like he owned Stanley Park. It's like the lore of this house. This area's called El Boya because he owned the El Boya stables. Were his stables. Anyway, so there's something really, this old house, big old creaky 3,500 square foot haunted house. And so I walked in the house and just decided, like I just said, we bought it that day. I said, just give them asking. And then we started digging out the yard, and then, you know, the whole yard came out, like just was this huge space, a big hole. And then we put all the concrete catacombs in. Anyway, but to just come in the hole, it was first thing I was like, there's just something special about this area, this land, this place on Earth, like in the world. There's something very special about, and then to just be in the ground, attached to I don't know, something. And I'm not a big like woo-woo kind of personality, but it just feels special. And so so there's a lot of, and then just even since this has been here, the amount of creativity that just kind of takes place. I'm not a big clock watch. I don't do corporate music. It's kind of the opposite of all that, right? It's just, we just hang out and do this until we're done. And I enjoy that. This is my personality. This is, this is me, highly stressed right now. We're leaving in 2 days for 3 weeks. And I have so many things to get done before I go. Like, it's just completely overwhelming. I've been doing all-nighters. And it's all good. Like, life is just good. We're blessed, fortunate. And so, so that to say, there's something cool about just the idea of this place. That I just wanted to build a place that none of us could afford, and then we all just hang out here and play songs in it, right? Like, so just it's easy, it's chill. And then the only other hidden piece of this endeavor is the fourth spot is there's a Yamaha C7 that's up in the house, and it's this beautiful C7 from the mid '90s. It's a serial number F2 model. It was this kind of limited run. Anyway. Amazing instrument that came out of a studio in Ontario, and they had built an entire studio, beautiful studio around this piano, had named the place after the piano. Like it was just, and so we happened to be living in Toronto when that place went under, and I went in and talked them out of this piano, and so we crated it up when we came out here a few months later, and so it's sitting up there, and it is a stunning instrument. Like that lady, she had Yamaha techs come out from Japan a few times to replace the soundboard and the strings and the hammers. And, like, it's stunningly beautiful. So anyway, so that's the other hidden piece that a lot of people utilize. They'll come in and just do piano tracks for their thing, or the jazz cats love it. So it's pretty special. So yeah, that's just a weird. The whole thing is just weird. It's weird. I'm weird. It's weird. We're all weird. Just play music. Why is it called Studio D? I get asked this often. My last name is Dierkin. Starts with a D. My studio in Orange County didn't have a name. And I had it for 9 years. It never had a name. And the fun was whatever you wanted to put in the CD, you could. So it would be just like recorded at A-Hole Records or whatever. Like everybody, like I have boxes of CDs where and somebody came up with some sarcastic, smart Alec answer for where they recorded it. Anyway, so it just started becoming. They had to call it something, so its nickname was Studio D. So when I dug out the yard and did this, I wasn't going to rethink it. So it officially became Studio D.
So I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. He was a great guy to talk to. I really enjoyed meeting him and seeing his place. If you enjoyed that, please give me a thumbs up. If you didn't, give me a thumbs down. Let me know what you think. And we're going to be doing more of these studio tours on this channel. So please hit the subscribe and the bell notification so you know when we're doing stuff like that. And we'll talk to you again soon. Have a great day.